As someone who's dated people from online multiple times, this isn't the only time I've seen someone scream at the sight of their date. In fact, most of the time I've been the one screaming.
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Bride of Frankenstein starts off right where the first movie ended. It turns out that both Dr. Frankenstein and his creation have survived the events of the first film, and the doctor is being recruited by someone even crazier than him to create a woman. Now, I've mentioned this before in my comparison video for Phantom of the Opera, but when it comes to the Universal monsters, I'm not exactly the hugest fan. There are some Universal monster movies that I like, and there are others that I don't like. I know it's sacrilegious of me to say, especially as a horror fan, but I honestly just can't get into Dracula, the Mummy, the Wolfman, or the color version of Phantom of the Opera with Claude Rains, but I like the rest of them. Frankenstein was one of the only Universal monster movies that I was able to watch even as a child without falling asleep, and I admit that there was a period of time where I stopped liking that movie, and it was honestly just for the dumbest reason. Basically, after reading the novel by Mary Shelley and falling in love with it, I dismissed the movie as a piece of trash for how extremely different it was from the source material. However, I've learned since then that you can take movies like Jaws and The Godfather, change them from their source material, the books they were based on, to make them even better. I'm not saying that Frankenstein is necessarily better than the book, but in case you couldn't tell by some of my decorations in the background, I eventually came around and started liking it again. And when it comes to Bride of Frankenstein, I like how they take a more darkly humorous approach to the story. It's not like very obvious in-your-face humor. It's not like Bride of Chucky, where Chucky flips the bird to some random stoner. It's a little more subtle. For me personally, some of the more amusing moments in the film come from the villain, Dr. Pretorius. He's the guy who recruits Dr. Frankenstein to build a female, and he's just really cartoony and over the top, and when he reveals his own mad experiments, it's just so strange and absurd you can't help but laugh. However, this movie does have some moments of pretty effective drama as well. Easily my favorite sequence in this movie, as I may have mentioned last year in my review for the modern day Frankenstein, is when the monster comes across this cottage housing an old blind man, and he makes friends with this character. And the scenes between these two are so touching, and I was so invested in the story at this point that I legitimately didn't want that time to end, and once it ultimately did, it was pretty heartbreaking. During the second half of the movie, the monster becomes more of an asshole towards Dr. Frankenstein, but given how his friendship with the blind man ended up going, you can't really blame him. He's just completely alone in the world, and he needs this doctor to create some sort of companion for him since he can't make friends with people. But I can't really blame people for being afraid of him. I mean, he's like electric and stuff. I'm already running that joke into the ground. The second time is going to be the last. Promise. Anyhow, it does raise the age-old question that's often brought up when it comes to the Frankenstein story, who is the real monster in this case, and who is more capable of human emotions. Now, there is one thing that some people who have never seen this movie before might have an issue with, and I'll admit I don't really care for it either, It's the fact that the bride that's mentioned in the title of this movie isn't on screen that much, and when she is, she doesn't really do anything. Ah, yes, I remember a simpler time when women were just there. Still, as long as you can get past that one flaw, Bride of Frankenstein is still a really good movie. If you enjoy black and white movies and you've somehow gone this long without seeing Bride of Frankenstein, do yourself a favor and watch the original back to back with this movie. And with that, I hope you all have a good one.